are well maintained and well seen. I'm not saying that the houses aren't being well maintained and well seen, but if you've got a fence up and your house is blocking most of your backyard, you don't need green space there. And that property that we're talking about on Colorado backs up to the reserve of Xenia. So there's already a 6-foot fence, privacy fence, that was installed there that backs up to the reserve of Xenia, and our current residents have to maintain that fence, so they don't even get to see the whole backside of Colorado. So if Mr. Branham is given that opportunity, no one will even see the back of his garage or the green space, because of the fact there's a 6-foot fence back there. So I just wanted to come up and give you my opinion on that, and hopefully you guys can come to some type of resolution tonight in regards to a compromise, going back to 3 foot, maybe 5 foot, but I don't think 10 foot is necessary in all instances, and I know their variances are there for a reason, and I know that's why the Planning and Zoning Board Commission is, used, and I understand that for all the different commissions. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything you guys do, and thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to come and address the Xenia City Council this evening, please? Seeing no one else come forward, we will move to old business. First item under old business is Resolution 2019-B, a second reading, authorizing the purchase of 3 marked SUVs for annual police vehicle replacements through the state DAS Cooperative Purchasing Program, authorizing the purchase of an unmarked vehicle from Key Chrysler at an amount below state bid, and authorizing the sale of city-owned vehicles. Originally introduced by Councilman Smith.
So moved, Mr. President.
Move for passage. Second, please.
Second.
Seconded by the Vice President. Any discussion or question on the motion, please? Councilman?
I'm going to be voting no, and I won't go into a lot of detail on our financial situation, but I would rather wait. Our last income tax collections were down substantially. This April and May, we're going to have get a better feel on our income tax collections and our financial state in the city of Xenia. So I cannot support spending, I believe it's $118,000. $118,000. We all have to live by our budget. I would love to have a new car myself, but I drive a 2012 Impala because my budget just won't allow it. So I think the city, due to its financial state, needs to start being financially responsible. Thank you.
Any other comments, please? Just for clarification purposes, I think as I read through the agenda, the total of the 3 marked vehicles is $85,000. And the one $25,000. Yeah, it's 110. Okay. Any other discussion or question on the motion, please? Seeing none, roll call.
Vice President Wallace?
Aye.
Councilman Mitchell?
Aye.
Councilman Louderback?
No.
Councilman Smith?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
No.
Mayor Mays?
Aye.
President Engel?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Now we have a public hearing, ordinance 2019-02, a second reading, amending section 1224.01E7 of the City of Xenia Land Development Code, which was originally introduced by Councilman Dean. So we should open the public hearing first and then seek a motion. So at this time I will open the public hearing and invite anyone wishing to speak for the proposed amendment to step to the podium, provide us your name and address. Limit your comments 4 to 5 minutes, please.
This is about the setbacks again, right?
Yes.
Okay. Matt Johnson, 563 Jody Drive, Xenia, Ohio. I just go off of what I said before in public comments. I just believe there needs to be a compromise, And hopefully the council will take that in consideration, that we don't all have big backyards. And outbuildings are very important to have in the city. We need to protect our stuff, and trying to, like Mr. Branham said in the past, build a family and stay here and keep roots in Xenia is very important. And you shouldn't have to have, you know, if you want to make something nice, it's one thing in regards to making it nice and being able to follow the wall. I could understand if the city didn't like it because it was unkept and everything like that. I can completely understand that, but that's a code enforcement thing. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else care to speak for the amendment, please?
Cody Branham at 320 Colorado Drive. I just wanted to come up and say thank you for your support. I know that the support aspect has not been great on this motion, and I think a lot of it was based upon people don't want to show up to a city council meeting. People don't want to come up and voice their opinions in front. I had support through Facebook, support through friends sharing posts, of course, you know, well wishes and stuff like that, but it's tough, you know, to get people up out in front of the public to really voice their opinion. So I really appreciate your time and appreciate you coming out and support, and appreciate the councilmen that stopped by and chatted during the meetings and whatnot. So thank you.
Would anyone else care to come and speak for the proposed amendment, please? Seeing no one else come.
Mr. President, I'd like to hear what Brett has to say, Brian Foster has to say.
Certainly, may I suggest that we continue the public hearing through the comments portion, and then we can invite city planner to come forward. Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against the proposed amendment, please step to the podium, provide us your name and address. Limit your comments 3 to 4 minutes, please.
Good evening. My name is Mary Haller. I live at 456 Northwest Street here in Xenia. I've come before you tonight as a concerned citizen. The text amendment before this council tonight is my biggest concern. I understand Mr. Branham's want for a detached garage, as I don't have one, and that it could improve his property, but in my opinion, it may not necessarily improve the properties around him. The Land Development Code Section 1224.01 states, the purpose of this section regarding accessory use states, this section authorizes the establishment of accessory use and structures that are incidental and customary subordinate to the principal uses. The intent of this section is to allow a broad range of accessory uses while not creating adverse impacts on surrounding lands. Although Mr. Branham's current neighbors may or may not support him putting up the garage there, it could impact future property owners in the future. For instance, a prospective owner may not want to look at a garage so close to their yard and therefore not purchase the property. I know that Mr. Branham applied for a variance through the BZA and the variance was denied. And this seems to be where Mr. Branham has come for another way for him to accomplish his goal for building his garage. However, I do not believe this text amendment would be a good thing for the city of Xenia. As the Land Development Code Section 1220.03E6 states, the proposed amendment will not constitute spot zoning where special treatment is given to a particular property or property owner that would not be applicable to a similar property under the same circumstances. If you, the members of City Council, vote in favor of this text amendment, I believe you are doing so for a particular property owner and not for what is best for the city of Xenia. I personally do not want a garage or carport built 3 feet from my property line. First, I believe it would be an eyesore to me and may become a nuisance to my property by shadowing a portion of my yard that may have a flower or vegetable garden. Second, how would the neighboring property owner maintain the structure without coming onto my property and possibly causing damage to my property? This 3 feet would be 3 feet from the foundation or base of this garage or carport. So this does not include hangover, easement, not easement, gutters, hangovers, and things that happen with structures. So then you're only talking 1 or 2 feet from my property. I don't have an issue against Mr. Branham having a detached garage. If somebody wants to have that, they should, but that should be within the code, or at least be approved through the BZA with a variance that is compromised. So, in conclusion, if this text amendment is approved, it affects all districts in Xenia, not just residential, but business ones too. There are a lot of residential districts that butt up to business districts. I personally live on a street with a foundry. Granted, it's not in my backyard, but it's in my neighbor's backyard. I wouldn't want the foundry 3 feet from my property or my house. It's loud. Something just to think about. So, tonight I implore you, members of council, to really think about what this text amendment means for Xenia as a whole before casting your vote tonight. Thank you.
Would anyone else care to come and speak against the proposed amendment, please? Seeing no one else come forward, if anyone would like to speak on the subject, but neither for nor against the proposed amendment, please step to the podium, provide us your name and address. Limit your comments 3 to 4 minutes, please.
Mr. President,
Yes.
at this time, I can go ahead and give my report. Some of you were questioning. This came up to planning last Thursday. Do you want me to go ahead and give that report now?
I think
would close the public hearing first.
I think we need to close the public hearing first.
Got it.
Anyone wishing to speak neither for nor against? Seeing no one else come forward, I will close the public hearing at this point in time. Councilman Smith, I believe the Vice President had a request at first. Would you care to make that request, sir?
Yes, I'd like to hear from Mr. Forstner, it's personally just tonight. Because as I
Please.
understand it, we're only requesting a foot. The first paragraph goes, I don't want to go into that for a moment, but explain first of all the rationale why it was changed. Obviously, I live in a house with my garage, if it had a 3-foot setback, I would tear it down because my property, garage is almost right on my property line, not 2 feet. But I'm in downtown Xenia, and my property was built in 1929, so, and the tornado removed my neighbors, so I don't have to worry about it, or them. But the neighbor across the lot has no complaints about my garage, nor does the other neighbor on the other side. And I did buy all of the land that I sit on, and I want to hear the rationale for why I can't do what I'd like to do on my land as long as it doesn't impact anybody else personally or so forth.
Sure. Well, just to kind of summarize the report that I sent out, I've been told that there was an interest in kind of seeing the background of why we made this change.
A little louder, please.
Yeah, I sent a report to council explaining why this change had been made, since it was my understanding there that you in particular had an interest in that. And it was changed in 2016 as part of the Shape Xenia process. That was a comprehensive overhaul of the city's zoning and subdivision regulations. That followed the conclusion of the city's comprehensive plan process called eXplore. Both of these processes were community-driven, had community meetings, community forums, online and in person, surveys, a variety of ways to involve people in the process, because we wanted it to come from the community. We wanted our plan and our code to reflect the community's wishes and what's best for Xenia. In that process, in the process specifically of writing the code, for one thing, the code had not been updated since 1968. So we wanted to modernize the code. We wanted to reorganize it and make it more readable and user-friendly. We wanted to implement the principles of eXplan. We wanted to streamline our permitting process to make the city more business-friendly, easier to deal with. We wanted to restructure some of the use regulations, and we also wanted to strengthen our design standards. So in this process, there was a compromise, there was a balance that we wanted to strike. On the one hand, we wanted to encourage people to keep improving their property. We wanted to maximize property rights, but at the same time, we wanted to do so not at the expense of property values, not at the expense of neighboring properties. We wanted to make the city easier to do business with. We wanted to make the city more business-friendly, more welcoming to investment. We want to keep existing residents here and businesses here while attracting more in at the same time. So it was a balance between encouraging development, making us an easier place to do business, but at the same time, improving the community's appearance and functionality and quality of life, and preserving property values. That was the balance that we wanted to strike throughout this process. So, for example, when we updated the code in 2016, we, on the one hand, adopted architectural standards citywide. At the same time, we expedited permit review processes. We reduced the need to go to boards and commissions. We relaxed our land use regulations. We relaxed some of our signage restrictions as well. So there was a balance, that type of balance that we were trying to strike. We want to encourage growth, but encourage growth that enhances our community. So in the case of this particular standard, when we increased the minimum setback requirement for detached garages from 3 feet to 10 feet, keep in mind that for all other accessory buildings like sheds, those are still at the 3-foot setback. This 10-foot setback only applies to garages and carports that are detached. At the same time of increasing that standard, which I agree added a restriction, we also increased the size of those garages that you can build in your backyard. So in the case of Mr. Branham, for instance, under the old code, he would not have been permitted to build his garage because it would have exceeded the size limit. It would have exceeded the square footage limitation. So he would not have been able to build it in any location on his property. Under the new code, we allow a larger square footage, we just require it to be set back a little further. So under the new code, Mr. Branham can build his garage, he just has to set it back at 10 feet from the property line. So really, when we made this change, it was a balance. On the one hand, we were giving owners more rights to construct for people who, like in Lanewood or Arrowhead, maybe only have a 1-car garage or no garage at all. We're giving them a little more space to build a larger garage in their backyard. We're just requiring that they be a little more courteous to the neighbors by providing that 10-foot setback. And it is true that in some cases, you may have smaller lots, 50-foot wide lots, for instance, and there isn't a lot of space. In that case, I would argue that a 24 by 30-foot garage, like the one that Mr. Branham is requesting in this case, and is actually the size, 720 square feet, that everyone is entitled to, any house is entitled to. If you have a small yard, say a 50 by 100-foot lot, that's going to dominate your backyard no matter where it is. And if you set it back an extra 7 feet, you're just giving a buffer to your neighbor. You're helping them preserve their quality of life and property values. If it's set back only 3 feet, it's still going to dominate your backyard. So just in conclusion, we came up with this standard not just to increase the restriction, but at the same time, we balanced that with allowing people more space, larger garages. So that pretty much answers it. I mean, there were also we had the goals and eXplan of improving neighborhood design standards as well, and we accomplished that. But just, it was all a balancing act. So that's kind of explains where that standard came from. Any other?
I have one question. If my garage burned, or say the tornado came and got mine like it did the house next door, would I be able to rebuild it?
We have...
and even upsize it?
You would be subject to the new standards. Now, in terms of a damaged building, there are some provisions that, depending on how damaged it is, you can simply
A
repair it.
tornado
rebuild in
seems to take
place.
things away, at least it did the
Well, if
one
there is a
between me and
tornado-
my neighbor.
Yeah, if there is a
It
tornado.
just disappeared.
Yeah, if it is completely wiped out, you would have to build it under the new standards, if it's an accessory building, yeah.
I have a problem with that.
Mr. Forshner, you mentioned how it's only, this setback only applies to detached garage and carports. Can you define detached garages and carports compared to, say, a shed or a gazebo? As far as the size difference, like what is the standard as far as differing between a
Right.
garage and a
Well,
shed?
yeah, that is, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that is part of the reason we increase the setback, because detached garages tend to have much more bulk than other types of accessory structures, which would include sheds or gazebos or things of that sort. So a garage, detached garage, typically, in a lot of cases, people are usually building a two-car garage, which can be anywhere from 500 to 720 square feet. It's less often that people are building a single-car garage, which would be in the neighborhood of maybe 12 by 20 feet. So, most often we're getting two-car garages, which tend to be, 24 by 20 or larger.
So what would switch a shed to a garage or a garage to a shed? Is there anything in the code that specifies what makes a shed and a garage a garage?
If you're parking a car in it,
Okay.
parking vehicles in it.
So Mr. Brenham could build this 3 feet off, just not park a car in it, and build it the same size?
Right, but that's not what he's asking for.
Well, I'm just saying, someone could potentially.
Theoretically, yeah, the way the standards are written, if it is just a shed, if somebody really wants a 720 square foot shed, which we tend not to see, they could certainly do that.
Brian, let me ask you about that again, because at least from what I remember from the code, it was things like sheds, gazebos, play equipment, things like that, had a limitation of 50 square feet. I don't know, maybe we can find where that is in the code. I thought there was a total of 50 square feet, could be within the 3 foot. Anything above that had to be set back, and you could build up to 720 square feet. I don't know, maybe I misread that.
If it's under 50 square feet, it does not require a zoning permit.
Doesn't even need a zoning permit, okay, okay. Right, so I can build that anywhere in my yard at that point, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned several times that you think the new, I agree with the new codes. I don't agree 100% with it. How could anybody up here sitting, if it's that thick, agree with 100%? I use a lot of common sense. And I mentioned earlier, we're losing, our income tax collections are down. We're not growing, Xenia, and there has to be a reason for that. I think part of the reason is we don't take case-by-case basis. And I mean, Mr. Branham, and by the way, Ms. Haller, I regret what you said. Only time I met Mr. Branham, I went out and I looked at his house. As a councilman, I do that. I investigate each case. So I do, it's not a personal favor to Mr. Branham, and I resent that you said that. Now, getting back to you, why can't we make, why do we have to go through all this crap? I mean, you mentioned several times in the eXplore, it's to make user-friendly, business-friendly. This, to me, this case is not business-friendly. And that's just my personal opinion. And again, that's why we're not growing our tax base. We're running people out of Xenia, not bringing them into it. Thank you.
I would like to correct something.
Anything else for city planner, please?
Yes, I have something for Mr. Forshner.
Hold just 1 second. Were you done, Councilman Dean?
I just have one more quick question. So
Thank you.
if they were, most likely if someone was to build a garage to put a car as under definition of a garage, they would probably put on a footer which would extend probably a foot, based on the footers that I've seen, maybe 2 feet away from the actual foundation of the garage, and based on the current code, or even this new change in the code, it would be 3 feet off that footer, so technically it would make it 4 or 5 feet off of the actual garage wall, because the footer would be underground. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. It's actually measured to the.
To the wall?
The building, to the wall.
Okay. Not off the footer?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. This question is for Mr. Forshner, and actually, the mayor could probably also answer this. But if I remember right, everyone on planning and zoning read the minutes from the BZA meeting in December. And, you know, this isn't a lot of crap. There's a process that we have to go through, and it's called the right steps. And BZA was one of them. And BZA was willing to allow less than a 10-foot setback, if I remember right. But Mr. Branham did not want to accept that compromise.
There was some discussion about that.
Okay.
There was some discussion about a possible option if the garage was a few feet smaller, that there was some compromise.
And he would have to just reapply through
Yes.
BZA, is that right?
Well, my recollection is that during the meeting, there was discussion of reducing the size of the garage slightly in order to address the applicant's concerns about preserving yard space. And the applicant did not agree to go along with that. It was after the meeting, there was discussion about whether there could be a lesser variance granted. And we said that's certainly a possibility that would have to go back through the process. He would have to apply again for a variance.
Got it, okay.
And that's a legal.
But there's also the issue at this particular case of a utility easement. And I don't know if that's ever been addressed or been properly presented, that easement has been satisfied by the utility company. Has anything been provided?
There is a 10-foot easement along the rear property line. DP&L has electrical infrastructure in that, and we informed the applicant of that. The applicant reached out to DP&L, met DP&L on the site. The applicant claimed that DP&L would allow him to build the garage 7 feet from the rear property line, encroaching 3 feet into that easement. I cannot verify that because we haven't seen anything in writing. However, that is what the applicant told us was the outcome of that meeting.
All right, thank you.
Wouldn't that be your job to research that?
It is our job. Well, it's actually on the applicant to determine where he wants to put his property, to put his shed or his garage. We actually did reach out to help him reach out to the utilities that occupy that easement, and we helped him facilitate that meeting.
But that's not part of your job to research easements on properties?
It is, and we do.
Okay.
I think the question the councilman is asking is it your job to secure the utility company's agreement or disagreement?
No, it is not.
I agree. Anything else for our city planner, please? The public hearing is now closed. We are going to go to a motion on this particular issue, followed by a second, and then council discussion is the proper protocol, as I recall.
Yes, and let me just run through with you just quickly the procedure
Thank you.
of how this needs to be done. This was a text amendment initiated by council.
Yes.
Which is allowed under the land use code. The land use code also does require that any text amendment that you initiate does go to Planning and Zoning Commission for their review.
Yes.
Per the charter, they are an advisory board to you. They make a recommendation to you, which you can follow, not follow, but you are to consider their recommendation. In this case, the amendment was sent to Planning and Zoning Commission at their meeting on the 7th. They voted 3-1 to recommend that council not adopt this ordinance, making the change. The way that would happen, if you choose to accept their recommendation, there would be a motion and second, and you would vote against. If you don't want to follow their recommendation, you can certainly make a motion to accept this ordinance as it has been presented. You can also adopt this ordinance with amendment. Those are your 3 options this evening.
Thank you. Is there a motion from one of my colleagues on the item before us, which is the amending section 1224.01E7 of the City of Xenia's Land Development Code?
I would like to make that motion for passage, Mr. President.
Motion on the floor to pass the amendment as written. Second, please.
Second?
Seconded by Councilman Lauterbach. Any discussion from my colleagues, please?
Sure.
Or Councilman Smith?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read some of the transcript from the Planning and Zoning meeting last Thursday. We had one commissioner served on the commission for 7 or 8 years. And basically, his comment is to note that we do have a process that's called BZA. BZA is a quasi-judicial board for the city, whose decisions are only really appealable in a court of law. Even though it has come to council, this commissioner would suggest that we deny this. Also, another commissioner made the point that if you have 2 abutting properties and you allow a 3-foot setback, and both those properties have garages that are within 3 feet of their property lines, that's 6 foot between the 2. Should there be an issue with a roofing, siding, gutter, that type of thing with overhang, you're basically getting on the other property owner's property to make any kind of fix or correction. And that is actually why Beaver Creek Township has stopped allowing 3-foot setbacks due to legal reasons and maintenance issues with actually neighbors having issues with people actually trespassing on their property to fix that. Another commissioner basically also commented that this is not just affecting Mr. Branham and his property, but this text amendment, if approved, actually affects every city citizen and every property owner in the city, not just residentially, but also commercially. So if I live next to Xenia Foundry and they decide they want to put a garage 3 foot from my property line, if we allow this tonight, we're opening up this to everyone to be able to do this. So that's why planning and zoning, they did discuss this. Mr. Branham did have somebody representing him. We actually had one other person that really did not speak in favor or against. However, the commissioners really strongly recommended that, as a commission board, they would expect and respect council to honor our commission members. We have a hard time getting citizens to volunteer for these commissions. And as a council, if we're going to override their recommendations, I don't even see why we would have those commissions. If we're, the 7 of us are going to sit here and basically just do what, vote however we feel, then again, I would recommend that we not have these commissions. But, that's planning and zoning, and I don't get to vote on planning and zoning. I do get to vote tonight. I really think we're setting a dangerous precedent here, so I can't support the text amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman?
I appreciate all our commissions, but us 7 people sitting up here is represented by you, the people. So I do like the volunteers, but we've got to make the decisions. And to me, it's just a common sense. Why are we going through this thing? Again, we're represented by the people to represent all the citizens of Xenia. And this little case here, it's not going to spread to the rest of Xenia. Come on now, give me a break. It's not going to affect the rest of Xenia at all. So 75% of Arrowhead's already built out with garages with the 3-foot setback. So anyway, vote your conscience. That's all I can tell you. Thank you.
Any other discussion or question, please, Councilman?
Yeah, I just want to let you know that I took this to heart. I understand this, and I agree with Councilman Lauterbach. We need to represent all of our community. in my mind, once this left the BZA and the zoning board, this is all 10,000 of us, all 10,000 homeowners in Xenia. So taking the input of one individual on one side or the other is not a good sample size in that context, because there's an awful lot of other folks that aren't here tonight. They're going to be affected by this. I went through all of the maps from the auditor's office and looked at all of our different neighborhoods. You know, we've got 28 different neighborhoods in Xenia. We've got a number of them that have no garages in their backyards. We've got a number of them over in Hooven Allison where they all do, because that's just how they were built at that time, and on South Detroit Street. That was just due to the structure of those types of things. But this will affect all of those neighborhoods at that point. I think there's a reason why we have setbacks and structure within the code, and it does constrain us. Obviously, it does. There's folks that probably like to build a 3,000, 4,000 square foot home on a piece of property and be able to have that 3 feet from the yard size. But we, principal structures, we say, hey, you got to have 20 to 30 feet offset off of the street. We have to have a setback on the side yard and a setback in the rear yard as well too. The reason we do that is principally so that you have some buffer zone between you and your neighbors at that point. I think, if you live out in the country, if you got a 5-acre lot, there's a lot of things you can do. I mean, I was out at my mom's place today, 25 acres, do anything I want to out there. And because I'm not bothering anybody. There's no houses. I can't see a house from where I'm at. Okay, so I can go do anything I want to out there. But when I'm on my lot here in Xenia, things I do on my lot affects my neighbors at that point. We by our code tell our folks that they can only have a 6-foot fence between us. And I did the math, did the arctangents and stuff, and I'll just tell you, every foot that you set back is an additional foot of height of that object you don't have to see from your backyard. So when you bring it in 7 feet, you're just saying, here's 7 more feet of that building that I have to see, and 7 more feet that it's going to block out sunlight or other things or impede back on me. And I out of all 940 homes in Arrowhead and in that section, I counted them all up. There's 15% that have rear setback yards, and I can tell you the exact street number in every one of those because I checked them all out. The other interesting thing was 35% of those actually meet the current code. So even though I doubt very few of those have been built in the last 2 years, but even at that time that they were built, it was feasible to do that. And for various reasons, the homeowners decided that they would or they wouldn't. There's a number that are at the 3-foot setback. Once again, this has nothing to do with an individual's use of their own property. I mean, I'd like to max out my own property up to the limits that I could. But there's constraints we put on each other because we live within a city and we have a community we live within the context of that. So I also went out and I spoke to a lot of homeowners. I didn't talk to anybody that had a garage because I knew that they liked it and that's why they had it. What I did was I went to the neighbors next door to those, and I went to 40 homes. And once again, that's not a statistically very large sample size, but that's about all the time I had to do. And what I found was about 20 of the folks said, doesn't matter, doesn't affect them. But there was about 20 of those folks that said, yeah, I really would prefer that thing wasn't as close to my property line. And it really does have some impact on me, okay? So once again, for whatever that's worth, there at least seemed to be some sense from folks that having a structure that close. As a matter of fact, I went to one house where he had 3 garages all the way around him and his lot, and he had a small lot. And the issue was that once you're in a small backyard, and there's a lot of small yards in Arrowhead, and you put garages all the way around that, you're encased in that point, And this code would allow that. I think. Once again, we've got a lot of different neighborhoods in town. Unfortunately, even in our zoning, when doing R1C or R1D, even R1C zoning affects an awful lot of our communities, and that hits about 12 of our different neighborhoods. So we can't even go by the R1C or R1D zoning to do some of these types of things that we'd like to. And perhaps we need to get back to the criteria we have within the BCA and modify that. I mean, we can do that, but once again. That is the law. That was established by us. So those criteria were established for the zoning, the BZA, so that they wouldn't have favoritism towards individuals that they'd have basically criteria that could be defended or not. And I want to make sure I'm not misspeaking anything, Brian. I don't think we have to meet all 9 criteria. That was the majority of the criteria. Is that correct? I don't think anybody has to meet all 9 criteria. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. In this case, the applicant,
One app, they met 7 of the, or they failed to meet 7 of the 8 applicable criteria.
Right. So listen, I've been through that process. I had to go to the BCA. I had to do my presentation on my property, and you know, you're going to your fellow citizens at that point, you know, and making appeal to them. If we don't believe that the criteria that the BCA has set up, and once again, that isn't the preference. That's not a thing that we can waive. That is in the Ohio. That is in our ordinances. Okay, that is our law, and if we think we need to modify that, then we can modify that at that point. If we think we need to loosen up those criteria or establish some different criteria that will allow us to take a look at different neighborhoods, I'm all in favor of that. And so I guess all I'd say is, and I also went back and read all the Shape Xenia documents, got on some links that probably shouldn't be in there anymore. But looking over that, I think the folks that at that time did a very good job of balancing. And I read over the old code, what was there before, and took a look at the new code after that. And obviously nothing's perfect, right? And you're not gonna please everybody, right? Like I said, we got 10,000 residents, right? And I mean, we could put this on a ballot measure, and you're gonna have a significant number are gonna vote yes, and a significant number are gonna vote no at that point, right? So obviously we're not here to please everybody. I think right now this has nothing. What we're doing here as a council right now has nothing to do with any particular individual. So Cody, I want everybody to know this is no statement on an individual's request or an individual's not, because right now we are deciding for our entire community, and because of that, I'm not going to vote in favor of that, because I really think that going to 3 foot everywhere is not good for our community, and it has a lot of drawbacks and things that could happen with that. Once again, if we need to get, I think these are things that need to be dealt with case by case, and maybe we need to go back to the BZA criteria, take a look at the various neighborhoods that we have, because we know what those are. That was one of the things we identified when we did the X plan, and identified the fact we've got different flavors of neighborhoods in town, and some things that there's some things we'd like to do within that context, then let's do that. But I think that'd be a much more appropriate way for us to decide this. So I just want to let you know what I've done in terms of the research and why I'm going to vote the way I am.
Other comments from my colleagues, please.
I'd like to just applaud Councilman Urschel for the research that he did, and I can't argue with that, because I didn't do that kind of research. But as a homeowner, as a person who would like to see homeowners have a certain amount of latitude on their own property, I guess I need to ask the question of the law director: how can Mr. Brandon have his garage and be satisfied our existing laws? A lot of hard work went into the X plan. A lot of hard work went into that process, and I don't want to just vote to negate it. But on the other hand, I also don't want to see a homeowner who wants to increase the tax base by building a garage on this property be precluded from doing that. And I need some direction from you, and including how we vote on this particular text amendment, in order to, I want to have my cake and eat it too, how he can have his garage, and how that can be achieved, and so that he could get the advice that he needs.
Well, the text amendment that's before you is more than just for that one property.
I understand that.
It does affect every property
Exactly.
in the city. He can have his garage, it just has to be 10 feet off the property line. The process that you have in place when a homeowner doesn't want to or can't meet specific regulations is the Board of Zoning Appeals. He's been through that process. At this point, really the only option, and from what I heard tonight, there was some discussion maybe about a smaller garage, and BZA would have allowed a smaller setback with a smaller size. That's an option that would have to go back through the process, but that's certainly an option that Mr. Benjamin has.
Any other discussion from my colleagues, please?
I guess I would just say, this whole text as it's written is currently completely unenforceable unless we're gonna send people door to door searching in people's sheds to make sure they aren't parking cars in their sheds. We can't really enforce this anyways as it is. It kind of makes it pointless.
Well, then,
Madam Law
propose
Director, could you
propose a
respond to that,
version
please?
that's enforceable then, right?
Well, general rule of thumb, I think, and
Constitutional rights.
Mr. Forshner can correct me if I'm wrong, the one thing that I've always thought to differentiate between a garage and a shed, a garage is typically something you're gonna have to get a building permit for. You're pouring a footer, there may or may not be electric. The minute a building permit kicks in, it's a permanent structure. That typically, and under the building code, because the building code doesn't regulate sheds, but it does regulate garages. So if you're pouring a footer, it's something permanent, you have to have a building permit, that's almost always gonna be a garage. A shed is something that's more temporary, you could pick it up and move it on the property, if you need to. That's how I've always thought of it and differentiated between the two.
If you want me to add something.
Was
Please.
that it?
I would just add to garages tend to have garage doors and driveways leading to them.
Any other discussion from my colleagues, please?
Mr. President, just one thing I would add, not to belabor a point, but based on the motion and the second, just to make sure everyone's clear, an aye vote is a vote to change the current setback from 10 feet to 3 feet. A nay vote is a vote to keep it at the current 10 feet.
Thank you. Any other discussion, please? Roll call, please.
Vice President Wallace?
I'm gonna abstain. I don't like the answer that I got from Mr. Forstner on my garage, if I happen to be so unfortunate as to lose it. And I can't vote to change it from 10 to 3 without applying to everybody in the city. But I'd like to see the Brandons get a big garage. And of course, that's gonna take some more work on their part and so forth. Sorry about all that conversation, but I'm voting to abstain.
Councilman Urschel?
So clarify, Ms. Fisher, again, what aye or nay means in this case. I just want to make sure I'm straight on
An
that.
aye vote is a vote to change the setback from 10 to 3. A nay vote is a vote to keep it at the current 10 feet.
Okay, nay.
Councilman Lauterbach?
Aye.
Councilman Smith?
No.
Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Mayor Mays?
No.
President England?
No.
Motion failed.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is ordinance 2019-03, an emergency, providing appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures for the city of Xenia, Ohio for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019, and declaring an emergency. Our final budget and annual appropriations ordinance. Mr. City Manager, any introduction before we open the public hearing on this?
Yes, sir. Presented this evening for consideration with public hearing is ordinance 2019-3, which is, of course, as indicated, our appropriations ordinance. Tonight's activities are the culmination of a series of activities dating back early to the spring of 2018 when our initial tax budget for this current fiscal year was initiated. As of this point, all state, county, and local requirements for preparation, public notice, and public hearing will have been met. The ordinance authorizes the appropriations necessary to provide all core services for city operations for the ensuing fiscal year, and this includes our expenditures related to our capital budgets. While comprehensive, this funding plan is conservative, and as such, there may arise needs on different occasions throughout the remainder of the year that will require supplemental appropriations in order to meet specific operational resource deficiencies. The ordinance is presented as an emergency this evening in order to finalize all funding and appropriation amounts at the earliest possible date to allow city departments and divisions to initiate bid procedures and other related activities for capital projects as soon as possible, with the intent that we'd be able to get those projects completed by the end of the year. That being said, the budget as presented for all funds totals $69,158,075.44. This includes positive ending fund balances for all funds. And I want to take a minute, as it is important to point out that this budget total is not a reflection of the actual cash we will spend during the course of the fiscal year. Rather, what is presented in that number is a sum total of the potential budget activities, including requested expenditures, cash transfers, for example, from operating to capital or from operating to operating and the like. We capture all of those in that budget total simply for accounting purposes, as Mr. Duke could go into depth on. Again, on a projected cash flow basis, our projected cash flow for key operating funds is estimated to be a negative $483,000. This is an area, as Mr. Lauterbach indicated earlier, we need to keep close an eye on, and we'll have more discussions about the overall situation as after we get through May and through our income tax collection seasons. And we'll keep a close eye on that, and as needed, come back to council later this year and have some discussions. But tonight we're recommending that council conduct the public hearing and then approve the budget, and we'll be finished with this round of budget for this year.
Thank you very much. At this time, I will open the public hearing on our 2019 budget. Anyone wishing to speak for the budget, please step to the podium, provide us your name and address. Limit your comments 4 to 5 minutes, please. Seeing no one come forward, anyone wishing to speak against this year's 2019 budget, please step to the podium, provide us your name and address. Limit your comments 4 to 5 minutes, please. Seeing no one come forward, anyone wishing to speak on the subject of the budget, but neither for nor against it, step to the podium, provide us your name and address. Limit your comments 4 to 5 minutes, please.
Matt Johnson, 563 Jody Drive. I haven't went through this completely. I'm not speaking for or against like we're not supposed to, but I'd just like to know, because this is on YouTube, not a lot of people watch it, and we don't know the numbers, but what does the city have as a rainy day fund? How much is in our accounts for that? I'm not sure if that's actually listed in here. I didn't have time to review that before I got here. Currently babysitter duty, so if you guys might be able to take care of that in your discussion at the end of this, that'd be great. But just like to know what the citizens know exactly what a rainy day fund is and where we're at. I understand there's a deficit, and we talked, Mr. Lauterbach, Councilman Lauterbach has talked about that, but I think the public needs to know that. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak neither for nor against the issue, please step to the podium. Seeing no one else come forward, I will close the public hearing at this time and entertain a motion as an emergency, please, to approve this year's 2019 budget.
So moved, Mr. President, as emergency.
Moved by Councilman Smith as an emergency. Second, please.
I'll second it, and I would also like to have Mr. Johnson's question answered by Mr.
We can certainly take care of that during the comments portion. Thank you. We have a second from the Vice President. Discussion, please. I believe we have a request. Would you please describe the state of our rainy day fund?
Sure. So the city has a rainy day fund. Specifically, what we're typically referring to when we say rainy day fund is a reserve in our key operating funds. Some of our other funds have reserve requirements as well, but typically when people are talking about that, they're talking about our key operating funds, tax revenue for core services like police, fire, dispatch court, those types of things. The reserve requirement is usually in the neighborhood of $3 million. It's equivalent to 2 months. It's 18%, but basically 2 months worth of operating. This year, I think the reserve is actually somewhere around $3.4 million as far as what would be required. The city is projected at the end of the year to be just below the reserve requirement. We certainly will make adjustments if necessary in order to make sure that that reserve requirement is met. A lot of that is contingent, as was said earlier, on tax collections, and we usually have a much better idea of how those collections will come in the April and May time frame. And once we see that, then we can make decisions on what, if any, we would need to do in order to make sure that the reserve requirement's met. But the city has for many years now met that key operating reserve requirement. We're very diligent in making sure that, that we're meeting that. There are cash flow issues from time to time. For example, January is a huge expenditure month for us when we pay workers' comp and HSA contributions and those types of things. So from a cash flow standpoint, occasionally we'll dip just below that reserve requirement. But that's kind of what that reserve is for, so that you have some fluctuation. But we try to make sure that on a budget year basis that we're meeting that reserve.
Any other discussion or question, please? Councilman?
Is the requirement state mandated, or is that a city policy?
Yeah, that's a city policy. So council approves each year financial management policies and goals, and council can certainly change that. We do recommend, having a reserve that's at least in that neighborhood, because it does help to help our bond rating as potential lenders are looking at the financial viability of the city. It also impacts the way that the state rates us when they do some of their analysis of all the local governments and their financial health status. They have their financial health indicators that they release each year. So it is a best practice to have a reserve requirement, but that reserve requirement is set by the council each year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other discussion or question, please?
Is this our discussion right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, two items I'm really concerned about with our budget, and these are issues that the city manager and the rest of the folks have brought up to us, is that whether we meet the income to meet this budget doesn't help us set a vector towards addressing two systemic issues that we have right now, and that's our storm water drainage issues and our road infrastructure. And I get that per our direction of the council to you folks, to the finance director and the city manager and stuff, we've asked you to do the 5-year planning based upon projected income. And so part of what we get back then is we get a projected plan that really does not address those infrastructure needs, because the projected income is not meeting that. And I just don't believe that this is a sustainable path for us to head down as a city. Right now, I know we're spending some additional dollars in 2019 for the roads, but that's not sustainable with the path we're going in terms of the selling of property and allocating some additional funds, because there's a point where in a year or two there aren't going to be those additional dollars to allocate. And really, we need to have a plan to support our infrastructure as a city. And that ought to be one of the principal things that we as the council are directing you folks to do, to come back to us and let us know what we need to know to do within that context. I know we had an advisory group that looked at the roads, and that was part of what drove the additional millage request, and that did not pass. But we're still in the same situation from that context. So I plan to vote yes on this budget because it's a one-year budget, but I'm also hoping, as we dive into looking at the budget structure, the 5-year planning going on through this next year, that we have a budget that addresses that or starts to address that next year. And I'm concerned that we have some business as usual that we've just fallen into in the context of how we do business, and we may have to just tighten our belts or set other priorities on things too. And we've had some discussion about the fact that we are within the municipal court. We as a city are supporting the townships and some of the other villages around us to a deficit amount, and we ought to be addressing that because we don't have that $500,000 to do that. That $500,000 deficit there is 5 miles of road that ought to be taken care of. We've also had a discussion about the emergency services. I don't know what the numbers were. I just looked at it. It was somewhere in the order of 80 to 90% of all the calls we have for the fire department are for ambulance services, emergency services. And I think we're looking to write off about $1.2 million of charges in this next year based upon past experience. And that's once again, that's another 12 miles of road that could be paved. It's about $100,000 per mile of road to get paved. And we're paving, we got 300 miles of road, and we need to be paving, somewhere in the order of 20 to 30 miles a year just to maintain the infrastructure. And we're desperately falling behind on that. And we're at a instead of a repaving cycle of 15 years, we're on a repaving cycle of 40 years. And that's just not sustainable for us, the community. Now, I'm relatively new to all this. There are probably some really good issues that came up in the past, maybe going back to the tornado, I don't know, that got us into this situation. And probably real decisions that the council's had to make through the last 3 decades to get us here because of financial constraints. I'm not blaming anybody from that point, but I'm just saying we cannot maintain this. And our stormwater drainage issues are very similar and things that have to be addressed within the context. So I'm looking forward to working with the city managers, financial managers, and the folks over this next year. And shame on us if we don't come back next year and have a plan over time to start addressing that. And there's only 2 ways to deal with this. You have to bring in additional income, or you've got to defer other items coming out of that, right? But at the end of the day, if we can't maintain our roads and we can't take care of the stormwater drainage, those are 2 critical things we have to handle as a city. And so I'm hoping over this next year we can come up with a good plan to address both of those.
Thank you. Any other discussion or question, please?
I agree with the councilman, and I forgot to bring up when I voted against the new vehicles. By the next council meeting, I would like to have a complete list of our fleet management and the cost of each vehicle. I don't want our workers driving around in 1957 Chevys, but I see a lot of new vehicles in the city of Xenia, and I would like a cost analysis of those vehicles. I know we tried last year leasing. I don't know how that's turned out, but I just like a cost. We need to look under, I'm not trying to frighten the public, but our finances are not in the best of shape. We need to look under every rock. So that's just one area I think we can look at. Thank you.
If I could, Mr. President, just for clarification
Please.
purposes, so a list of all the fleet, their model years, is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah.
And when you say cost, are you saying purchase cost or operating cost or?
Both, if you could.
Because, yeah, we probably can show the original.
We should have it in the asset system, yeah. It would, yeah.
And, I mean, we can provide that to all of council, certainly.
Yes.
We'll just think about how we show the operating cost. And I just want to respond to a couple of comments. I don't think you'll find an argument for many of us with anything that's been said. We had discussion last week in special session. The agenda report's pretty clear. We want to be forthcoming with council about where we think we're at, where we think we're headed, forthcoming with the public. I wouldn't push the panic button, but we need to be aware and we need to be steadfast in staying on top of this through the course of this year. As we discussed with council, there are some peculiarities, I'll call them, with our revenue collection, some things that, as you look at our employment numbers, unemployment rate, things like that, very, very positive numbers. As you look at the income tax collection, they don't reflect the growth that we're seeing in those areas. Positive, from a positive standpoint. And frankly, we just really don't know why. We've had no major closures. Again, the employment numbers are at really almost historic highs in terms of the total number employed. So we'll continue to look at that and analyze it. To the point of expenditures, I completely agree. I had a conversation with the assistant city manager this past week and asked him to begin looking more in depth at various lines of expenditures, looking at fuel, for example. How much fuel are we using? Are we seeing an uptick, and why might that be? Other overhead expenditures, why might we be seeing any increases that would or would not be justifiable? So I completely agree we need to look at those things, and I think Councilman Urschel's right. The pathway we are on with respect to a lot of the infrastructure is no different than what's happening at the state and federal level. It is not sustainable. Said in a event last week at the Dayton Development Coalition, we'll listen to Governor DeWine, he said the exact same thing. Corner to corner in the state of Ohio, our streets are literally falling apart. There is insufficient funding coming through at the state level to be able to support the need to rehab. Going so far as to say that I think the Ohio Department of Transportation is almost literally out of money as you think over the next couple of years the commitments they've made. So This is a big problem. It is not going away. It's only going to get worse. And it will need to be a combination of trying to find additional resources with some austerity measures to try to begin to tackle it. So we would agree with those commentaries wholeheartedly.
Any other discussion or question, please? Seeing none, roll call.
Vice President Wallace?
Aye.
Councilman Urschel?
Aye.
Councilman Lauterbach?
Aye.
Councilman Smith?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Mayor May?
Aye.
President Ingle?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Now move to new business. First item is ordinance 2019-04, an introduction, amending the official zoning map of the city of Xenia, Ohio to rezone 3 parcels along Greenway Boulevard comprising 13.6 acres, more or less, from P1 Public and Institutional District to B3 General Business District. Mr. City Manager, please.
Well, in the way of discussion of expanding tax base and revenue, we present this item this evening for ordinance 2019-4. This is an ordinance that would amend current zoning of the P1 at the location and rezone to B3, which would accommodate a range of commercial uses, including retail, food service, and other compatible commercial activities. This is located out in the Progress Drive area between Greenway Boulevard and West Main Street, property currently owned by Greene County. Tonight's action comes as a result of a long-term partnership between the city and county relative to the disposition of the property. Our leadership has been working together to accommodate commercial development interest we've been presented with, and we are grateful to our county leadership partners for their role in helping to meet the market demand for retail growth in our community by making this property available for development. The rezoning matter was presented to our Planning and Zoning Commission for its required public hearing on February 7th, 2019. And the commission subsequently did vote to approve the rezoning. This evening, the ordinance is presented for introduction and is the recommendation of staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission that council adopt the ordinance to amend the city's zoning map to rezone these 3 parcels along Greenway Boulevard comprised of approximately 13.6 acres from P1 Public and Institutional District to B3 General Business District.
Thank you very much. May I have an introduction from one of my colleagues, please?
So introduced.
Introduced by the Vice President. Thank you.
And the Councilman Lauterbach, and we have both introductions.
Next item is Resolution 2019-C, also an introduction, authorizing the city manager to execute a lease agreement with J.P. Fritz Business Center for the city-owned property at 130 East Church Street for the purpose of operating a small business incubator. Mr. City Manager.
And following the same thread in trying to expand business opportunities in our community, and with previous discussions with council and your direction, staff is presenting this evening Resolution 2019-C. This is a resolution authorizing execution of a lease agreement between the city and J.P. Fritz Business Center for the use of the city-owned property at 130 East Church Street, which was formerly the Xenia Adult Recreation Center. The city has been working with Manifold Development, a local entity, and Central State University Extension Office to promote a business incubation service center. This center would be, of course, known as the J.P. Fritz Business Center. The center would provide an array of services intended to assist local entrepreneurs in their pursuit of starting or expanding private business enterprises here locally in Xenia. The initial lease term is for 3 years, and the center will be responsible for all utilities, maintenance, and operating expenses associated with the incubator administration. Staff recommends introduction of the resolution this evening, and if approved, we anticipate execution of the lease sometime in March, with the center beginning to work toward an opening sometime after April 1st of this year. So I want to applaud these folks for their efforts in partnership with the city to help provide opportunities for our local businesses to grow.
Thank you very much. May I have an introduction from one of my colleagues, please?
I do that.
Introduced by the mayor. Thank you very much. Next item is an administrative motion appointing a volunteer to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Councilman Smith, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight under new business, I respectfully make the administrative motion to appoint Ms. Faith Cerise to Planning and Zoning Commission. There has been one vacancy on Planning and Zoning, which was advertised on the city's social media outlets, website, and government channel. The city clerk received one letter of interest from Ms. Faith Cerise. I have discussed this opportunity with her and respectfully recommend her appointment to fill a vacant term expiring on December 31st, 2022. With her background check has been completed and is satisfactory. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Have a motion from Councilman Smith to appoint Ms. Cerise. Is there a second, please? I'll second. I'll defer to Councilman Dean. Motion seconded by Councilman Dean. Any discussion or question on the motion, please? Seeing none, roll call.
Vice President Wallace?
Aye.
Councilman Urschel?
Aye.
Councilman Lauterbach?
Aye.
Councilman Smith?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Mayor Mays?
Aye.
President Engel?
Aye.
Motion carried.
And our final item under new business is an administrative motion approving the schedule of bills in the amount of $625,657.97. Mr. Finance Director.
I have nothing to note on the bills this evening.
Thank you. May I have a motion, please, to pay our bills this evening?
So moved, Mr. President.
Moved by Councilman Smith. Second, please.
Second.
Seconded by the Vice President. Discussion or question on any of our bills, please? Seeing none, roll call.
Vice President Wallace?
Aye.
Councilman Urschel?
Aye.
Councilman Lauterbach?
Aye.
Councilman Smith?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Mayor Mays?
Aye.
President Engel?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. This time we'll move to reports of committees. The first item is the Board for Recreation, Arts, and Cultural Activities that I sit as chair for, and there are several items to be discussed. In regards to our review of past programs, we had a presentation by city staff describing Hometown Christmas 2018 with the thought collectively from the staff and from the BRCA board that we will again do Hometown Christmas 2019, albeit on a, in all likelihood, later date that will probably be a somewhat smaller event that will also likely be moved back to the downtown area. There's more planning and such to take place in regards to that. The Santa house would still be out and about, and Santa would be there for the children to visit. But the view is that based on attendance at last year's event, that some changes were warranted, and BRCA will be looking at those over the next several months as we prepare to move forward. The street, excuse me, street pole banner replacement program was also presented by the Assistant City Manager, and in that, I have photos here. They are proposing, and if the camera can zoom in here, the one my finger is on at this point in time, the older one, is what is up, and two new designs have been presented. One over here on what would be my far left, your far right, as a new design for a general purpose street pole banner, and one here for festive and patriotic holidays. There may be some changes made to these, and the overall view was that the past pole banners have survived well past their design life. I think they are on the order of 10-ish years old at this point, and were designed for about 3 or 4 years. They are in need of replacement. So BRCA and the city are looking for businesses and or individuals who would like to step forward to sponsor some of these pole banners as we have done in the past. I believe the amount for each banner was in the $140 range. If you would like more information on that, please don't hesitate to contact the city clerk at city staff and can provide you additional information on that.
How many are we gonna need, Mr. President?
I knew someone would ask that. They said the actual number of
120 total poles that could accommodate them.
20 times 140.
Would you like to donate some? Moving on, there will be, the youth recreational basketball program is in full swing at this point in time. They have lost, unfortunately, their previous 2 Saturdays based on the weather, no surprise to anyone. But there are 6 boys teams and 3 girls teams, and they are, okay, that's the report on that. The annual Easter egg hunt is coming up on Saturday, April the 20th. More information about that as we proceed towards that. Easter is actually the day following on April the 21st, and we are seeking volunteers to support that, specifically from our community schools National Honor Society that typically supports that program. Bloom with Xenia, canvassing. The individual responsible is canvassing next month for adopters of those flower pots and such. If you would like to take on one of those flower pots for the planting season, again, contact the city clerk for additional information. Community gardens will be available from mid-April through October 31st. And looking way ahead to when we'd all like to be in a warmer month, on June the 1st will be the annual fishing derby, and they are seeking sponsors for that. So if you would like to, or know of a business that would like to sponsor a portion of the fishing derby for Xenia's youth, which usually has between 80 and 120 to 130 children out fishing at Shawnee Park Lake, please feel free again to contact, I'm getting an evil eye from the city clerk after sending all of you her way. But we would greatly appreciate any support from the community on any of those programs. Finally, the tree committee provides an update. They have received nominations for 3 heritage trees, an American elm, a sweet gum, and a dawn redwood that will be presented at some future council meeting to acknowledge those as heritage trees within the city. And that concludes the report. There was lots to talk about that evening. Any questions for BRCA, please? Thank you, Councilman.
I'd just like to applaud BRCA for bringing Hometown Christmas back to downtown.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I'd like to see a community festival be brought back to downtown. You know, we could utilize both Shawnee Park and our downtown, but when old-fashioned days, if anybody can remember that in Xenia, it was bustling downtown Xenia. Again, I like to see as many activities as we can in our downtown district. Thank you.
Thank you. And just in response to that, Councilman, I would agree. The balance point that we are discussing with the city staff is that going to downtown, generally speaking, will incur additional costs to the city in terms of safety service, public service, that sort of thing. And we are, as a commission, trying to be respectful of overall expenditures as we've discussed broadly tonight. But I would agree, I love it downtown. And this will be a running item of conversation such that anyone listening or present in the audience or any of my fellow colleagues who would like to come and speak to BRCA on the issue, we would love to hear what your interests are. We were frankly surprised at the probably 1/3 to 1/2 less in hometown Christmas turnout this year as opposed to last year. And of course, it was somewhat chilly, but it wasn't incredibly adverse weather. We would like to hear from the citizens what they would like. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
If I may, just responding to the councilman's point, we are in discussions with the community festival. We have another event partner that we think is looking, and I think it's quite likely will marry up with a festival, which will bring quite a few additional activities downtown on the Saturday of the event. So we're looking at 5K, an extended bike race, some other activities that would be downtown. So it's not a complete switch downtown, but it would expand the overall number of activities that are being provided that weekend, and most of those expanded activities would be anchored downtown.
I'd like to second what Councilman Lauterbach said. I think when we do activities downtown that open up, and once again, it has to be in a partnership with the merchants down there, but it gives you a setting where you feel free to go into a lot of places downtown and the merchants that you wouldn't necessarily do, because you would say, hey, I'm not necessarily planning on doing some shopping here, or that's not what I'm looking at. But when you have a festival kind of activity like this, you feel free to go in. And I know when we had it downtown, a couple of these things, I went and visited a lot of places I've never even been in before. And once again, I think that's just a great opportunity to get our people into the downtown area to see the businesses that are there and to help us support those businesses. And once again, it has to be reciprocal on the side of the businesses. If they don't want to do that, that's understandable. But I think that they'd welcome us helping folks come in and get a first pass of an understanding who the people are that have businesses downtown.
Just as a point of clarification for the council president's comment earlier too, in terms of some of the inhibitors, it should be kept in mind that it does incur additional manpower costs because we do have more roadways that are shut down, so there are some inconveniences with that. The other big challenge we face downtown with a lot of these festival type events, we don't have the infrastructure, so we don't have an additional electric panel downtown or the water connections. We do have those connections installed down at Shawnee Park for all the activities we host down there really year round, so that facilitates a lot more vendor usage and things like that. So. But I would suggest, long term, as we think about long term, 20, 30 years maybe, improvements downtown, we look at enhancing some of that infrastructure to be able to facilitate more of these activities, and also looking to add more green space to have some better physical space downtown to do that.
You didn't mention in any of your reports anything about First Friday, and I understand we lost our primary persons that were working on First Friday late last year.
No, they've stuck it out. They're returning this year. We are planned, or in the planning stages for the May, June, and July. The July event, of course, will be partnered with the Fireworks Festival, and I'm really pleased to report we're taking a little different approach. All the partners with that July event, I think it'll flow much more smoothly. The focus will be downtown from 4 till about 8, 9. The focus will then shift down to the park. There won't be overlapping programming or vending. That way, it really provides just folks can start downtown, migrate their way down to the park. Yeah, those 3 events are planned, and we're very excited about it.
And the reason you didn't hear about it from BRCA is it's not a BRCA event necessarily.
Right.
We're very interested in it and supportive, but it's not something that we plan.
I got you.
Any other comments or questions for BRCA? I feel like I was pushing up against the discussion of ordinances. Next item is the Traffic Commission. Says February meeting was canceled. Anything to add, Councilman Dean?
Nothing to add.
Thank you. Anything for Councilman Dean in traffic, please? Next item is Planning and Zoning Commission. Councilman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. Xenia Planning and Zoning Commission met in regular session on February 7th at 6 o'clock. One item was the election of a vice chair. That was Mr. Matt Bennett was elected to vice chair the commission. There were 2 public hearings that night. One was case PZC 2019-01, which was actually our ordinance tonight of 2019-4, which was the rezoning of 3 parcels on Greenway Boulevard, and that did pass. The second was the public hearing on the text amendment, amending 1224.01, and that did not pass. That was all we had. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything for Councilman Smith and Planning and Zoning, please? Last item under reports is Board of Zoning Appeals. The January meeting was canceled. Anything to add, Mayor Mays?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. Anything for Mayor Mays and BZA, please? Moving to appointed official reports and council comments. Mr. City Manager.
Well, this meeting seems way too short, so I have 5 items to add. First, I just wanted to let our public know.
It's only Valentine's Day, come on.
Only Valentine's, yes. I wanted to let our public know, or remind our public, we will have our administrative offices will be closed Monday. We respect President's Day, but our staff actually will be working. We are doing an in-service day. We have a full day agenda of training activities planned for our staff. Some are required and some are developmental in nature, so our staff will be participating in that Monday. Offices will reopen on Tuesday, their normal hours. If you've, unless you've been under a rock in the Miami Valley in the last 24 hours, you're aware of a major water crisis in the city of Dayton and Montgomery County. I wanted to make 2 points on this tonight. One, to reassure our residents that it has no impact on our system. We have a closed water system. It's all under the auspices of our licensing here in the city of Xenia, so no impact for our residents. But I did want to reassure folks that in the event in the future that we do have any type of water quality concern, we do have an established protocol which is approved under Ohio EPA that we follow. We're required to send out notification publicly through typical media streams, Cox Media outlets, Channel 22, whatever it might be. We send that information out over all of our platforms, social media, website, and so forth. And we would also utilize our hyper-reach system to call people citywide or to the affected area. So we don't have to do this very often. I can think of maybe 2 times in the last decade and a half that we've had any type of issue. But it does happen from time to time, and these things are very unpredictable. This time of year, it tends to happen more than any other time of year with the changing nature of temperatures and the impact that has on the infrastructure with the freeze-thaw cycle. So I just want to remind folks that they would hear from us very specifically if we do have any type of water quality issue. Third, speaking of that freeze-thaw cycle, we are aware of a lot of potholes in our poor beguiled streets. We had crews out pretty extensively about a week and a half ago. We had some extraordinarily heavy rain. A lot of the temporary pothole patches we put in have washed out. Crews have been out again. If you have a particularly bad pothole, you can feel free to call City Manager's Office or Public Service Engineering Department. Just report the general location and they'll get to that as soon as they can. I know just today, for example, on Detroit Street, there were a lot of significant potholes that were filled, so we're getting to them as quickly as we can. Next, I wanted to just acknowledge, as Eric Holtvogt did earlier, the REACH ribbon cutting ceremony. And the REACH project has just exceeded all expectations, blown away expectations for the YMCA in terms of their membership growth. Was reported to me today that the senior center has experienced exceedingly high growth that they didn't even quite anticipate. The universities are now open. In fact, we had a great conversation at Central State earlier this week about some of their extension activities they're planning out here at the location. So we want to thank all of those who have donated resources, who have helped get the word out to get that project completed and had a great ribbon cutting ceremony. And thank Councilman Smith and Dr. Wallace for your attendance, and enjoyed seeing you Sunday night. And finally, an issue of a lot of significance here in the past week and a half. We did have a safety incident at the Xenia High School. Just wanted to give a shout out to Xenia PD for their very prompt, very professional response. Wanted to thank publicly the Greene County Sheriff's Office, Beaver Creek Police Division, our Parks and Trails law enforcement staff, Ohio Highway Patrol, all sent resources here to Xenia to help contain that situation. In the end, the threat was very minimal, but it was reported as a credible threat. I think we do have some work to do with the schools to continue to improve how we communicate with the public and coordinate those things. But again, just a shout out to our public safety forces for their vigilance and their professionalism in dealing with that. So with that, I'll shut up, unless you have more for me.
Anything for our city manager, please, this evening?
If somebody wants, how does the hyper reach work if somebody
Yeah.
wants to be a part of that? Like, I know
Yeah.
if you don't have a home phone, as many of us don't anymore, how do you make sure that we're participating in that?
Yeah, so you can connect a home phone or a cell phone. The best advice I can give you, right on our homepage on our website, there is a link for HyperReach. Click on that link, it'll give you the instructions for what you need to do to add your number to the list. We don't use HyperReach very often. Typically, we save that for major emergencies. We will occasionally use it for certain public events that the city is, the city is promoting, but it's a great service. We encourage people to sign up for it. I think we're going to do a push for that at our neighborhood night out events this spring as well. So again, I would steer people to explorexenia.com, link right on the homepage, and they'll be able to click on that link to sign up for the service.
Thank you.
Anything else for the city manager, please? Mr. Finance Director.
I have nothing this evening.
Yeah, thanks.
I want to stay married.
Anything for our Finance Director, please? Madam Law Director.
I have nothing to add this evening, thank you.
So we have 1, 2, good. Got it. Anything for our Law Director, please? We'll move to council comments. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our city manager already mentioned the Dayton Development Coalition luncheon that we attended on February 6th with Governor DeWine as the keynote speaker. And again, as he said, spoke to many of these issues that we're facing here on our roadways. And definitely, he spoke very candidly and very openly, and it was very refreshing. February 8th, we had the city manager and I had an opportunity with Commissioner Kugler and Mr. Huddleston from the county. Discussed a lot of upcoming projects, and it was a very positive discussion. Again, just want to thank them for their partnerships and some things that we're able to move forward on. On the 10th, as you mentioned, the REACH Center, I just wanted to say I was not able to attend as I was with my family that evening, but I want to specifically thank Dr. Wallace for going on my behalf. I called him specifically and asked him to go on my behalf, so I wanted to thank you so much. On the 13th of February, I had an opportunity to meet with a representative from the Greene County Public Health Department. She is actively working on educating and bringing awareness to a lot of the upcoming issues with vaping and smoking. Obviously, that's already out there, but just she showed me some of the statistics and some of the pieces. If you just Google juuling, J-U-U-L-I-N-G, it's very eye-opening to some of the things that we are going to be facing as a community coming up. So I wanted to thank her for her initiatives and ways we can support her. And then today, I had an opportunity to attend the 163rd Founders Day celebration at Wilberforce University. It was a beautiful service, and again, Councilman Wallace was there, and it was very exciting. It was very interesting to hear some of the students speak and hear their passion for Wilberforce. So I wanted to give that shout out and say what a great event it was. And last, I wanted to personally extend my sympathies and condolences to the family of Brian George, who passed away this past Monday. And a lot of people probably don't know him, but he was very faithful in this community. He served very faithfully as the treasurer for Bridges of Hope, served as the treasurer for the Xenia Area Association of Churches and Ministries. He worked for Habitat for Humanity here in Xenia. And he was somebody, I spoke with his sister tonight at the viewing. I said one of the things I appreciated most about Brian is he faithfully volunteered for the Easter egg hunt. He faithfully volunteered for the Thanksgiving Day meal. If Brian said he was going to be there, he was there. And he didn't say much, but he did anything. If I needed him to go do something, he did it. And he'll be very missed. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Lauterbach, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to give a shout out to our city crews. During the last snowstorms, they did a super job. And I noticed the potholes today. They're out and about fixing the potholes, especially the ones I noticed on North Detroit Street. So it's a tough job, and I really appreciate the job they do. Also, I got a call last night, and this is my 12th year in council, and I learn something new every day. I need to ask, when we put our agenda online, is this the only thing published, or do we put everything that we get in Councilman's packet?
Yeah, I believe we only publish the actual agenda, not the whole packet.
Is there a reason why we couldn't publish the whole packet so people can understand some of the?
I don't see there's any reason why. It would probably have to take a little effort to, my guess would be have multiple documents, because sometimes some of these agendas that as one document would be too large to download, but I think we could probably add those as individual downloads online, yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank you. And lastly, I'd like to wish everybody a happy Valentine's Day, especially my wife. This will be her 56th Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Councilman Smith.
Piggyback on what Councilman Lauterbach said, happy Valentine's Day to everybody, and Monday, happy President's Day. I don't know about the rest of you. I've seen 2 sitting presidents in my life. When I was a kid, I saw Ronald Reagan, and that was actually before he was elected. And then I saw one of the Bush, George, not H, but second George. But and again, I also appreciate the work staff's doing with the resources that they have. Was able to attend the grand opening dinner of the REACH project, and I'd just like to thank all the partners on that, which besides the city of Xenia, that was Kettering Health Network, Central State, Clark State, and the Adult Senior Citizen Center. And the YMCA, yes. Who was really proud to announce Alan Milkus is the Chief Executive Officer there, I guess, right?
Xenia's director.
The Xenia director, and he announced that they have 11,000 members at that Y, and that's great. They're number 3 in Greater Dayton. And
went from the 8th largest in 8th largest to the 3rd largest with the project, and that's really reflective of not only the size of the facility, but I think we have become now the 2nd largest by total membership. So that's significant.
Yeah. And it's just, it's really nice to have that in our community. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilman Urschel.
So, looked at the Dayton Daily News today. No disparagement to the Xenia Daily Gazette. I read that too. But two things really caught my interest there. First was the Dayton Development Coalition had done an assessment of the impact of the Wright-Patterson and the Springfield Air National Guard. And 28,000 direct employees, but they estimated 50,000 folks are employed in and around the base as well too. That's a massive quantity of folks. The last assessment of the economic impact was around $4 billion done by the base 4 years ago. The coalition did that assessment. They said they really believe the annual impact's around $14 billion there. And so once again, that is the economic engine of the Miami Valley. And we don't have to do anything to establish it. It's there. It's present, and as we do continual base consolidation, Wright-Patt is only going to grow. We're just bringing on the F-35 sustainment program. Another 500 employees are going to be coming in the next year or two to that. And as we talked to some of the other meetings, we're literally going to have thousands of folks retiring and thousands and maybe up to 10,000 new college hires coming on to the base. And those folks are going to be looking for some place to live because the majority of them are going to be coming from outside this area. They're going to be looking for new housing. And a lot of them aren't going to be looking for homes. They're going to be looking for apartments to rent. And I just, my first assessment is the only place that those folks will be coming here in Xenia might be Deer Creek Apartments, and that's about it. So I think we need to be thinking a lot about how, and if we think it's important for us as a community, to start grabbing some of those folks, because wonderful paying jobs, long-term employment, very stable, and just think about that infusion of those folks. What a great opportunity for us here as a city. We got a lot to offer to them, but right now that's being brought. The folks on the 675 corridor are sweeping them all up, and I just said we need to be thinking about that. And once again, as well, ODOT basically said they're broke. They said get ready for gas taxes to rise to pay for the roads, but they're in the same situation we are. Terrible road conditions, don't have the funding, and so you either got to change your priorities, you got to look for additional income, but you have to address it. So we're in the same situation there too. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Councilman Dean.
I have nothing further to add.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. We didn't have reports of committees from the EDAB, but the EDAB did meet last week, and we elected a new vice chair as well. Teresa Felder from Clark State she's the continuing vice chair of the EDAB because she was also the vice chair last year. I too enjoyed my presence at the Reach Center, which was actually my first time to get through and see some of it. I didn't get to see it all, but I can't wait to get a further tour, especially of Clark State and Central State's operations. The one thing that you didn't mention, Councilman Smith, was that the YMCA indicated that they are having 1,800 visits a day. And I don't even know what the Senior Citizen Center is, but to me that's just significant volume. And what I saw of the facility, it's remarkable. I spent most of my time looking at the video that was going, showing everything from groundbreaking through the completion, and it was just something to behold. I too would like to extend my sympathy to the family of Brian George, whom I served with in the Xenia Area Association of Churches and Ministry. He was the treasurer when I was there as president, and like you said, just quiet, unassuming, but a workhorse. Mm-hmm. He also was significant in the early days of Bridges of Hope, and we just we'll miss him. We'll miss him sorely. The one last thing I wanted to say is I don't want to let Councilman Lauterbach get away with being the only one to congratulate his wife on Valentine's Day, because Joyce and I celebrated 53 years of marriage on the 11th, and I want to say happy Valentine's Day to her.
I haven't been married for 56 years. I met her, it's been 56 years since I met her.
Okay.
I've been married 52 years.
Okay.
So you got me.
I got you beat up. Well, I met Joyce 54 years, so you've known her just longer than I had. But Joyce and I have been together really. I met her April the 10th, 1965, and asked her to marry me within a month, but it took us a little while to get it.
She said no at first?
No, she said yes. She said yes. But we had some logistics to work out.
I understand.
For 53 years, we celebrated on Monday.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
That's it.
Thank you very much. I would also express my appreciation to staff. While they're out in the polar vortex, pushing snow, clearing things on your behalf, and also repairing a number of water main and other water issues that we had over the time. It is very uncomfortable work to be doing
Amen.
on your behalf, and they sometimes are not acknowledged as much as our police and safety services, but I promise you, they provide as much of a safety service, just in a different capacity, as what our fire and police service do. They are all working on your behalf and are doing excellent work, as was acknowledged this evening. I also would wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day, including my wife. I cannot even begin to approximate the number of years of my colleagues, but pleased to report that we're well past the 35-year mark. And grateful for that and for her every day.
Amen.
So thank you very much and happy Valentine's Day, Len. She promised me she wasn't watching, so I said I was going to say it anyway. Just finally, in terms of our boards and commissions, just a plug first. We are always looking for citizens to volunteer to serve on our boards and commissions. I'm not sure what our current lineup is, whether we have any openings or not, but we do. I'm seeing a shaking of head yes. For any interest in those, and I'll get the look again, please contact our city clerk. But on a serious note, and obviously the issue that we faced and looked at this evening, and even as a council, we were somewhat divided on. I am incredibly supportive of our boards and commissions, and just a small anecdote. I take what they recommend to me seriously, because they are spending their own volunteer time, and they have been individuals who have stepped forward to say, I care about my community, and like we do, they represent others' views to us in a broader sense. The adage is, a long time ago, 2006, when I first came on to council, I attended a new councilman's orientation. One of the things I still remember, one of the presenters told me was, when faced with a difficult policy decision like what we faced this evening, from a very wise former state level official, pay very, very close attention to what your citizens' committees are telling you. He didn't say always accept their points of view, but always listen to them very carefully, because for many of the same reasons I just mentioned a minute ago. They're volunteers, they care about your city, and they are freely asking to serve with no compensation whatsoever. So just a plug for our board membership. We need you. Please come and volunteer. And thank you to all our boards and commissions that are serving presently. Your service is appreciated, and we on council do pay very close attention to what you advise us and what you recommend to us. I have nothing further. If there is nothing from my colleagues, I would seek a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Latterbuck, seconded by the Vice President. Lightning speed. Roll call.
Vice President Wallace.
Aye.
Councilman Urschel.
Aye.
Councilman Lauterbach.
Aye.
Councilman Smith.
Aye.
Councilman Dean.
Aye.
Mayor Mays.
Aye.
President Ingle.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
You know, you're online. Do you think we should consider looking that up?